It's no secret that politicians lie, but at the same time, it's actually harder than you think to spot the lies. And it's not just the other side that does it, your side does it too. Over my 10 plus years as a peer-reviewed expert in logic, I've uncovered many political deceptions that even the most discerning individuals often miss. But by the end of this video, you'll be armed with a simple framework to read right through every lie. Now, off the bat, let's address an important question, namely, who decides what's a lie and what's not a lie? How do we actually discover objective facts, given that so much of our reporting on politics these days, whether you're on the right, left, or center, tends to present their version of the truth as objective fact? Well, that's where lie number one comes in, and it's the most fundamental lie of all. And both the right and the left are guilty of using it, and that is presenting opinion as fact. First off, a fact, strictly speaking, is something that can be falsified through the senses, or more directly speaking, through data analysis. This is a principle called falsification, invented by the 20th century logician Karl Popper. Let's take a look at two recent speeches, one by President Biden and one by former President Donald Trump, and see how they use this tactic of presenting opinions as facts.
Now folks, I don't know what you did last night, but I spent 90 minutes on a stage debating a guy who has the morals of an alley cat. To myself, Donald Trump isn't just a convicted felon. Donald Trump is a one-man crime wave. The thing that bothers me maybe most about him, he has no respect for women or the law.
As we see, Biden, as is common among politicians, makes several moral statements. Now, on a more philosophical level, I do believe moral statements can be proved true or false, and in fact, I wrote an entire book on that subject. However, these kinds of statements cannot be falsified. That is, we can't point to a piece of data or empirical evidence and use it to prove or disprove these kinds of claims. Instead, Biden's intention in using these statements is to make us feel something, whether that's outrage, hatred, disgust, to move us in some way to take his side. Trump also makes plenty of these kinds of statements, as in this clip.
In World War III with this person, he's the worst president ever. The Biden administration has been nonstop he has been a catastrophe.
Once again, how would you prove or disprove that a particular president was the worst or best president ever? Again, it's a value judgment, and we should recognize it as such. So if we want to debate something like that, we have to keep in mind it's a philosophical debate about values, but Trump positions the statement as if it were possible to find empirical evidence for it. And why is this even important in the first place? Well, using a value judgment makes it extremely difficult for your opponent to debate it. Presenting a value judgment as if it were a verifiable or falsifiable fact, therefore, is a convenient way to actually say very little of substance, yet get a substantial emotional reaction from your audience. And while both Biden and Trump make a heavy habit of presenting opinions as facts, they both use yet another tactic to try to bring you to their side, and that is lie number two. Appeal to authority. The fallacy of appeal to authority is a classic fallacy in logic, and you've seen this plenty in your everyday life, especially in marketing. Claims such as 4 out of 5 doctors recommend this cream or potion are just one example, but they're also used all the time in politics, often without us even noticing. Trump is especially good at this, but he has a very specific way of doing it. Let's take a look.
Joe and his handlers are insisting he's sharper than ever, and they say the videos of Crooked Joe shuffling around are clean fakes. You know what a clean fake is? They're deceptively edited. They say they're deceptively edited. All of the mistakes that he's made every day. He can't.
Did you notice it? It's particularly clever and therefore easy to fall for. It's the simple use of the word they. When Trump wants to make a claim for which he has little to no evidence, he often simply states something like, they say XYZ. It doesn't matter who they is. This phrasing makes it look like there's an authority outside of Trump that has the evidence that Biden has, in this case, some clean fake, as Trump calls it, applied to videos of him. Biden uses this tactic as well, but mostly by citing actual names or organizations.
Told him how he had called a veteran and had given their lives in the country in World War I and refused to go to the grave sites. He called them suckers and losers. He tried to deny it. But let me ask you, are going to believe a 4-star Marine general, his own former Chief of Staff, John Kelly, who said he said that? Or the disgrace defeating a lion?
Now, while this might make his claim sound more legitimate, it's important to note that it doesn't automatically make it true. It simply makes it falsifiable. And of course, we should fact check both Biden and Trump. But how do we fact check them? We hear this phrase fact checking thrown around all the time, but most of us aren't very clear about the actual process behind fact checking. But we'll get around to that in a bit, because before we can even get around to fact checking a claim such as the economy is doing well or the economy is doing badly, we would have to actually define what the economy is in the first place. Now, it seems like I'm nitpicking here, but the fact is, if we don't define all the terms that get thrown around in politics, such as the economy, healthcare, gun control, and the like, it's very easy to get tricked by the last lie on this list, which is the straw man argument. Let's take a look at 2 other clips of Trump and Biden to examine what the straw man argument looks like.
Take the life of a child in the 8th month, the 9th month, and even after birth. After birth, if you look at the former governor of Virginia, he was willing to do this. He said, we'll put the baby aside and we'll determine what we do with the baby, meaning we'll kill the baby.
So obviously this is a very controversial issue, and it's definitely an issue that should be covered carefully, both legally and philosophically. However, this is a clear example of a straw man argument, and creating a straw man argument is simply the act of 1, redefining your opponent's term, in this case abortion, and then 2, arguing against a version of their argument that uses that redefined term. In other words, when you create a straw man argument, you effectively argue against a version of your opponent's argument that they themselves aren't actually arguing for. But by doing so, it effectively makes your opponent look bad. But it's not only Trump who uses a straw man argument. Biden uses straw man arguments also, although they may be a little less obvious.
So when you talk about the economy, of course, it is by far the most important issue for voters. It's also true right now, Mr. President, that voters by a wide margin trust Trump more on the economy. They say that in polls. And part of the reason for that may be the numbers. And you're aware of many of these, of course. The cost of buying a home in the United States is double what it was when you look at your monthly costs from before the pandemic. Real income, when you account for inflation, is actually down since you took office. Economic growth last week, far short of expectations. Consumer confidence, maybe no surprise, is near a 2-year low. With less than 6 months to go to Election Day, are you worried that you're running out of time to turn that around?
We've already turned it around. Look at the Michigan survey. For 65% of the American people think they're in good shape economically. They think the nation's not in good shape, but they're personally in good shape. The polling data has been wrong all along. You know, how many, you guys do a poll at CNN, how many folks you have to call to get one response? The idea that we're in a situation where things are so bad. The folks that, I mean, we've created more jobs. We're in a situation where people have access to good paying jobs. And the last I saw, the combination of the inflation, the cost of inflation, all those things, that's really worrisome to people. With good reason. That's why I'm working very hard to bring the cost of rental down.
So what's the straw man here? Well, notice that the reporter asked Biden directly about the economy and then proceeded to specify her question by asking about inflation more specifically. In this response, Biden deflects and talks about polling data about consumer sentiment, as well as the record number of jobs created under his administration. But how is this a straw man argument? Well, Biden is essentially making the argument the economy is doing great, and all he needed to do in order to prove that was to implicitly redefine the term economy that he was arguing for. And that's where it can get truly confusing. For example, if you want to argue that the economy was bad under the Trump administration, you can define the economy narrowly in terms of the national deficit or job growth numbers, whereas if you want to argue that the economy was good under the Trump administration, you can define the economy narrowly in terms of things like prices. Conversely, if you want to argue that under the Biden administration the economy is doing well, you can define the economy in terms of job numbers and stock market growth, but leave out inflation. Hopefully, now you're getting the idea. The bottom line, when politicians use terms and buzzwords, we have to train ourselves to think critically and dig beyond the term itself. How are they defining the term? Does the term itself even have any definite meaning? How would I verify or falsify what they're claiming? But then again, how do we verify or falsify a claim? Aren't all sources of information biased? In short, if the information comes from a human, yes, it can be biased, but that doesn't mean there aren't ways to minimize or even in some cases to eliminate bias in our attempts to verify or falsify a claim. But here are 3 steps you can take to identify trustworthy versus non-trustworthy claims. 1, make sure the claim is factual versus opinion. For example, is it a value judgment such as X is a horrible policy that destroys lives? Then it simply can't be verified or falsified either way. So don't be fooled by these types of claims. 2, go directly to the source, but still leverage experts. While it is a fallacy to simply believe a claim because an expert stated it, there is a rational way to use expert opinion to validate a claim. Let's say a politician claims that minimum wage laws have led to increased prices for consumers in a certain industry. In this case, we would want to identify reputable, peer-reviewed journals that contain research on this. The problem? Unless you're a trained statistician or economist, you probably won't be able to properly interpret the research and instead will end up cherry-picking facts. In this case, it's helpful to seek out experts in the field, ideally those who have PhDs, who will help you interpret the research. Number 3, be skeptical about terms. When politicians use common words such as democracy, the economy, rights, and so on, we should have some natural skepticism, especially if we are in favor of the politician. Ultimately, it will help us be a better thinker. And at the end of the day, this doesn't just affect us. If we are all better thinkers and create more and more better thinkers in our society, we'll be more deliberate and careful about our policy decisions and create a more respectful public discourse. If you want to keep leveling up your critical thinking to control your life and also make a massive impact, then be sure to watch this next video.